The miracle of the dry stick. What if I told you that a dry, lifeless-looking stick from your garden could begin pushing out new roots in just 48 hours? It sounds almost impossible, doesn't it? Like something pulled from an old gardening legend. But in the world of plants, what looks dead is not always finished. Sometimes, hidden beneath that dry bark, there is still enough life waiting for the right signal. Welcome back to Earthly Delights, where we dig into the soil, study the quiet wisdom of nature, and discover how the garden can teach us not only how plants grow, but how life itself renews. For years, many gardeners have believed that rooting cuttings is mostly a matter of patience, luck, and hoping for the best. Sometimes you cut a branch, place it in soil, wait for weeks, and end up with nothing but a blackened, rotten twig. Maybe you have thrown away a cutting because it looked too dry, too old, or too far gone. Maybe you have looked at a beautiful rose, fig, grapevine, or shrub and wished you could create another one just like it, but felt unsure where to begin. Today, I want to change the way you look at those cuttings forever. This is not about a flashy modern trick, expensive rooting powders, or complicated equipment. This is about a simple, powerful method built from old agricultural wisdom and supported by what we now understand about plant biology. It brings together knowledge from ancient Rome, Greece, and China with the science of how plant cells wake up, heal, and form new roots. Once you understand this method, propagation no longer feels like a mystery reserved for people with a lucky green thumb. It becomes something clear, practical, and deeply encouraging. So let's begin. Let's uncover the 2,000-year-old method for waking dormant wood and helping even a dry-looking stick find its way back to life. Part 1. The ancient roots of propagation. Before we talk about how to root a dry stick, we need to understand why this method matters. Plant propagation is not a new discovery. It is as old as farming itself. Long before modern nurseries, plastic pots, and bottled rooting hormones, people were already learning how to multiply the plants that fed them, sheltered them, and shaped their civilizations. Around 4000 BCE in the Near East, early farmers began to understand something extraordinary about perennial crops like grapevines, olives, and figs. They realized these plants were not limited to seeds alone. A branch, when handled correctly, could carry the life of the parent plant into a new place. That discovery changed agriculture. Seeds can be unpredictable. A seed may produce a plant that is weaker, different, or less productive than the parent. But a cutting is different. A cutting allows you to copy the exact qualities of a strong, proven plant. If one grapevine produced excellent fruit, if one fig tree survived drought, if one olive tree grew with strength year after year, a cutting could preserve that success. By the time of ancient Greece, this practice had become more than a farmer's habit. It had become a form of study. Theophrastus, the student of Aristotle, and often called the father of botany, carefully observed how plants grow, regenerate, and produce new shoots. He noticed that cuttings taken from certain parts of a plant, especially near the base, often rooted more easily than wood taken from older, higher branches. That was not just luck. It was observation, experience, and early plant science. In East Asia, the same wisdom was developing with remarkable detail. In the 6th century, the Chinese agricultural scholar Jia Sixi recorded practical methods for cuttings, layering, and grafting in the Qimen Yaoshu, one of the oldest and most respected agricultural texts in the world. So when we take a cutting today, we are not simply doing a small garden task. We are continuing a chain of knowledge that has traveled through thousands of years. We are using the same basic truth our ancestors discovered. A dormant branch is not just a piece of wood. Under the right conditions, it can become a new plant. And that is the real beauty of propagation. It teaches us to see potential where others may only see something dry, old, or useless. Part 2. The cellular magic. Now comes the question every gardener eventually asks: how does a stick stop behaving like a branch and begin becoming a root system? The answer is one of the most fascinating parts of plant life. Plants have a remarkable ability that animals do not have in the same way. Many living plant cells contain the genetic instructions needed to rebuild an entire plant. This ability is called totipotency. In simple terms, it means that a plant cell has far more flexibility than we might imagine. When we cut a stem away from the parent plant, we interrupt its normal supply of water, minerals, sugars, and hormones. To our eyes, we have created damage. But to the plant, that wound becomes a signal. It tells the cutting that survival now depends on forming a new foundation. That is where dedifferentiation begins. Specialized cells near the cut area start to change. Instead of staying locked into their old role, they begin returning to a more flexible, youthful state. The plant is not giving up. It is reorganizing. It is gathering its internal resources and preparing to rebuild. Soon, those cells form a soft, fresh mass of tissue known as callus. Many gardeners see callus and think it is just swelling at the wound, but it is much more important than that. It is the bridge between injury and new growth. With the right moisture, oxygen, warmth, and natural hormonal signals, that callus can begin producing root initials. These tiny beginnings of roots slowly develop, push outward, and eventually become functional roots capable of absorbing water and nutrients. That is the hidden miracle inside a cutting. The outside may look dry and still, but inside, the plant may already be responding, healing, and preparing for new life. And this is why I always tell gardeners not to judge a cutting too quickly. A dry stick is not always dead. Sometimes it is simply waiting for the correct conditions to activate the life that is still stored within it. There is something deeply encouraging about that. Even after being cut away from its source, even after stress, damage, and separation, a plant still carries the blueprint to heal, adapt, and grow a new foundation. In the garden, that is biology. But in life, it also feels like wisdom. Part 3. The Elixir of Life Myth versus Reality. To awaken this cellular magic, many viral gardening videos will tell you that you need some kind of miracle potion. But as someone who has worked with cuttings, soil, and plant recovery for many years, I can tell you this clearly. Not every popular trick is good plant science. So let's separate the myths from what actually helps. You may have seen people dissolve aspirin in water and use it to soak cuttings. Aspirin contains acetylsalicylic acid, often called ASA, and the common claim is that it behaves like a natural plant hormone. But here's the problem. Synthetic ASA in human aspirin is not a true rooting hormone. At high concentrations, it may even stress the cutting and slow down root formation. Some research has shown that painkillers like aspirin can interfere with auxin movement inside the plant, and auxin flow is essential for proper root development. But that does not mean the old growers were wrong about natural rooting solutions. They simply used something better. Willow water. Fresh willow twigs naturally contain indole 3-butyric acid, or IBA, which is a powerful rooting auxin. They also contain natural salicylic acid, which can support the plant's defense response against disease and stress. To make willow water, you chop fresh willow twigs, steep them in hot water, and let the mixture brew for a few days. What you get is a simple, natural rooting liquid that has real biological logic behind it. Now let's talk about protection. Every time you cut a stem, you create an open wound. That wound can invite bacteria and fungi, and that is where many cuttings fail. They do not always die because they cannot root. Many die because they rot before they ever get the chance. This is where raw, unpasteurized honey can help. Honey has long been valued for its antimicrobial qualities because of its low pH and high osmotic pressure. When used carefully, it can help coat the wound, reduce the risk of rot, and give the cutting a small carbohydrate boost during its most vulnerable stage. Add a little fresh aloe vera gel for moisture support, and a light dusting of cinnamon as a natural antifungal layer, and now you have a practical, natural elixir of life that supports the cutting from two sides. It encourages rooting and helps protect the wound. Part 4. The Art of the Cut. Now that we have our natural rooting support, we need to talk about the cut itself. This step matters more than many beginners realize. First, hygiene is not optional. A clean cut gives the cutting a fair chance. A dirty blade can carry disease from one plant to another, and once infection enters the wound, even a strong cutting can fail. Always sterilize your pruners or grafting knife with rubbing alcohol before you begin. For hardwood or semi-hardwood cuttings, choose a stem from the current year's growth that has started to firm up and become woody. A good cutting is usually about the thickness of a pencil. Cut a piece around 6 to 8 inches long, and make sure it has at least 3 or 4 nodes. Those small bumps where leaves or buds emerge are extremely important because they hold concentrated growth activity and dormant cells that can respond when conditions are right. Remove the leaves from the bottom 2/3 of the cutting. Leaves lose moisture, and without roots, the cutting cannot replace that water quickly. The goal is simple: reduce stress and keep as much energy as possible inside the stem. Now comes the step many people skip: wounding. Make the bottom cut at a sharp 45-degree angle, just below a node. This increases the surface area for water absorption and places the wound close to one of the most active parts of the stem. Then, take a clean knife and gently scrape away a thin layer of outer bark on 2 opposite sides of the bottom inch. You are not trying to damage the cutting deeply. You are simply exposing the green vascular cambium layer. This is where the real action begins. Wounding gives the willow and honey mixture more surface area to contact, and it strengthens the plant's healing response. That response encourages callus formation, and callus is the bridge between a cut stem and new roots. In simple terms, this step tells the cutting, wake up, repair yourself, and start growing. Part 5. Creating the microclimate. Once the cutting has been wounded and treated with the willow and honey mixture, it is ready to be placed into a rooting medium. But this is where many gardeners make a costly mistake. They plant the cutting into rich, heavy potting soil, thinking more nutrients will help. In reality, heavy compost can hold too much moisture around the wound, and that often leads to rot. A rooting medium should be clean, airy, and evenly moist, but never waterlogged. The goal is not to feed the cutting heavily. The goal is to keep it alive long enough to form roots. A simple and effective mix is 50% coarse sand and 50% perlite. The coarse sand gives structure and drainage, while the perlite creates air pockets and holds just enough moisture. New roots are delicate, and they need oxygen as much as they need water. If the medium stays soggy, those roots may never form properly. Now let's bring in one old idea that still makes sense today: managing the root zone with small stones. Ancient Roman growers understood the value of stone mulch. When small pebbles are placed over the surface, they act like a gentle thermal mass. They absorb warmth during the day and slowly release it as temperatures cool. This helps create steadier conditions around the base of the cutting, supporting root activity while also helping the surface stay evenly moist. Finally, remember this: a cutting without roots cannot drink efficiently, but it still loses moisture into the air. That is why humidity is so important. To protect the cutting, create a small humid environment around it. A clear plastic bag placed over the pot can work like a mini greenhouse or humidity dome. This traps moisture around the leaves and stem, reducing water loss while the cutting focuses its energy downward into root formation. Aim for high humidity, around 80 to 90%, but keep the cutting in bright, indirect light. Never place it in direct sun under plastic, because heat builds quickly and can cook the cutting before it has any chance to root. The right microclimate is warm, humid, bright, and protected. That is the environment where a dry stick has the best chance to become a living plant again. Part 6. Deconstructing the 48-hour miracle. Now we come to the question everyone wants answered. When we talk about a 2,000-year-old method for rooting dry sticks in 48 hours, what does that really mean? Can you take a dry cutting, place it in the medium, and pull out a fully rooted young plant 2 days later? Let's be honest, because good gardening begins with clear expectations. The first 48 hours are not usually when you see a big root system with your eyes. They are when the most important invisible changes begin inside the cutting. In plant biology, those first 2 days are a critical window for rehydration, hormone absorption, and the activation of the cutting's survival response. When the cutting is prepared correctly, kept moist but not waterlogged, protected from rot, and supported with the right natural rooting signals, the vascular cambium begins to wake up within about 48 to 72 hours. The cutting is no longer just sitting there trying not to die. It begins shifting from survival mode into regeneration mode. That is the real miracle. By around day 5 to day 7, if conditions are right and the plant species responds well, you may begin to see tiny white bumps forming near the nodes or wounded areas. These are root initials, the earliest visible signs that the cutting is preparing to build a new root system. By day 7 to day 14, depending on the type of plant, temperature, moisture, and the maturity of the cutting, those root initials can develop into visible adventitious roots. These are the roots that allow the cutting to begin drinking, feeding, and standing as a new plant. So no, the 48-hour promise does not always mean you will have a transplant-ready root ball on the second day. What it means is that the most important turning point happens early. Those first 48 hours are when the dry stick decides its future. Given the right conditions, life inside that dormant wood begins to move again. And that is one of the most encouraging lessons in the garden. When life is supported properly, it does not wait forever to respond. It starts quietly, invisibly, and powerfully. Part 7: Hardening Off and a New Life. Now let's move forward a few weeks. You begin to see fresh green leaves pushing from the top buds. For a gardener, this is one of the most satisfying signs in the world. The cutting is telling you, I am alive. I have begun to root. But this is also the moment when many people make a mistake. They see new growth and immediately remove the humidity cover, place the young plant outside, and expose it to full sun and dry air. That sudden change can shock the cutting badly. Remember, this young plant has been living in a protected, humid environment. It has not yet learned how to handle wind, direct sun, or normal outdoor dryness. Its leaves are tender. Its root system is still young. It needs time to adjust. That adjustment is called hardening off. Start gently. Remove the humidity dome for about 1 hour on the first day. The next day, increase it to 2 hours. Continue this process little by little over the course of a week. As the plant spends more time in normal air, it begins to strengthen itself. The leaves thicken, the surface becomes better protected, and the plant develops a waxy cuticle that helps reduce water loss. This gradual stress is not harmful when it is controlled. It is training. It teaches the plant to survive beyond the perfect little world we created for it. And there is a lesson here for every grower. We cannot rush real growth. A cutting needs a safe place to heal, build roots, and gather strength. But once that foundation is there, it must slowly meet the real world. A little stress, introduced at the right time, helps it become stronger, tougher, and ready to thrive. Conclusion: the power of creation in your hands. The journey from a dry, dormant stick to a living, growing plant may feel like magic, but it is not magic. It is plant science, sharpened by centuries of observation, practice, and patience. By bringing together the wisdom of ancient Greek thinkers, the careful techniques recorded by early Chinese agricultural masters, and the practical environmental understanding of Roman growers, we turn a process that often feels uncertain into something far more reliable. We have learned that nature is not as fragile as it sometimes appears. Inside every living plant cell, there is a blueprint for regeneration. But that blueprint needs the right conditions before it can express itself. A clean cut, natural hormonal signals from Willow, protection from honey, a breathable sandy medium, gentle warmth, high humidity, bright indirect light, patience. These are not complicated tools, but together, they create the environment where a cutting can stop declining and begin rebuilding. This method removes much of the mystery from propagation. It proves that you do not need to be born with a perfect green thumb. You need observation, timing, and the right knowledge. So now I want to ask you, what will you grow next? Which rose, shrub, fruit tree, vine, or old garden plant have you always wanted to clone, but never felt confident enough to try? Share it in the comments, because I truly love hearing what people are growing in their own gardens. Every cutting has a story, and every new root is a small act of creation. If this journey through ancient wisdom and modern plant science helped you see propagation in a new way, please hit the like button and subscribe to Earthly Delights so you do not miss the next garden secret. Until next time, keep your hands in the soil, respect the wisdom passed down through generations, and remember, life always finds a way. Take care.